Hi, everyone. As we wait for people to trickle in, why don't current participants type anything they know about the Himalayan region in the chat? So this can be anything from the culture, the geography, the people, whatever it may be. Just use the chat function at the bottom. And it'll be a learning experience for everyone. So if you know something about this area that you want other people to know, just type it in the chat function and we'll start around 10:05 or 10:06 Central Time. We'll give about 1 more minute for people to come in, but for those of you who just did, just type anything you know about the Himalayan region in the chat. And so other people can also learn about stuff you know already. And we'll start in 1 minute. Okay, so a couple people did write facts that they did know, so that's pretty cool. Devangana wrote prominent Tibetan culture, also home to lots of pastoralist people. That is true. And then Dechen wrote, I know that the Himalayas consist of 3 parallel regions. I think you're talking about like the greater Himalayas and the outer Himalayas and things like that. So yeah, I do believe that's true as well. And so hopefully by the end of this session, you'll walk away with more information. Oh, Neil said, home to many ethnic groups, not a single group as many people generalize. Yes, that is also true. Thank you for that, Neil. So thank you all for coming to this webinar. Some folks on this call are based internationally, so I appreciate you all accommodating to the time zone differences. The agenda for today is to introduce some Zoom features in addition to the lineup of panelists. And then panelists will talk about their respective topics. And then the crux of this event will be the question and answer session where audience members can ask panelists any information they have, any questions they have, about education, health, development, and or gender in the Himalayan region. And then this event will conclude with some closing remarks by me. So many of you have used Zoom before, but for those of you who haven't, at the bottom of your page, there should be a bunch of buttons. There should be one that says question and answer. So if you see that and press on it, you'll be able to type your question. And then you also have the option of remaining anonymous. Just click the button. When you click the Q&A button, you should also see a button that says anonymous, and then you can just press that and send us your questions anonymously as well. So for those of you who want to remain anonymous. And there are also a few other buttons which you do not have to worry about today. So yeah, now on to panelist introductions. First up, we have Shivangi Singh, who will be talking about the relationship between education and gender. She has a lot of experiences under her belt. Some of them include founding her own NGO called Drishtikona. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. And that has educated over 50,000 people across Asia on gender issues. And being also an American India Foundation Fellow, where she designs and implements policies at the intersection of gender, education, and entrepreneurship for the Tibetan community in India. And for her local and global work, she has earned many honors and recognitions, a few of which include from the World Economic Forum and the International Youth Committee. And after Shivangi, we will have Sonia Gomez, who will be speaking on behalf of education and health in the area. So although not originally from the area, Gomez has extensive knowledge about the Himalayan lifestyle. She is an international advisor for Lotus Heart, an NGO that works on health and education for women and female empowerment, and an international advisor for Nepal Buddhist Education Meditation Center, an NGO in Nepal that works in education programs for illiterate adults and children, especially women and young girls. And then as the CEO of Spaso Zen Wellness Centers, she has been prized with Global CEO Excellence in 2018 by CEO Monthly International Magazine and Spa and Wellness Professional of the Year in 2019 by Luxury Travel Guide Magazine, just to name a few. And then last but not least, we have Tsering Wangmo, who will be talking about the interface of education and development. So as a Tibetan from Ladakh, India, Wangmo wields her personal experiences being born and raised in a remote village by refugee parents to fuel her storytelling and filmmaking work. She received a scholarship to study at New York University, where she was able to further delve into her interests. And Wangmo has created a few films, one of them being Conversations with My Mother, which received 3 awards at the My Hero International Film Festival. And she's currently working on a film and a children's book that parallels her own experiences, as well as many other Tibetans like me. So if you have any questions, make sure to put them in the Q&A section, and the panelists will answer them later on in the session. And please put the name of the panelist you're directing your question to, just to make things less confusing. And so now Shivangi will be taking the floor and talking about education and gender. So whenever you're ready, Shivangi.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Hi, namaste, Tashidilek. It would be an understatement to say that the world as we know it has changed in the past few years. 10 years ago, when I was a school student in India, the internet, especially social media, did not enjoy such a strong hold. More importantly, it did not influence education. Since the lockdown due to COVID-19, education has moved to a virtual space, and while that has many pros and cons, one good thing that has emerged from this trend is a greater increase in awareness of and sensitivity to social issues, especially gender issues. Growing up in India in the 90s or 2000s, one did not enjoy the sense of awareness that kids today do. I grew up in a highly patriarchal family. Even though my family members were well educated and well employed, I was not given equal freedom or opportunities as the male members of my family. Even as a high achiever, I had to miss several crucial educational and career opportunities just because I was a girl. There were instances where my relatives and even school teachers character assassinated me just because some of my best friends were boys. So overall, it was a very toxic environment to grow up in, but it fueled something in me. A desire to change the way the society sees gender dynamics. I decided to dedicate my life fighting for the cause of gender equality. And I fought the good fight in different ways by being a writer, educator, social worker, and a social activist. When the Me Too wave hit India between June to August 2018, the pot was burning hot already with a Thomas Reuters survey, which claimed that India is the most unsafe country for women in the world. And when I saw some of the social media posts by my friends and relatives on this movement, I was outraged. These people had the privilege of studying in some of the top institutions in India, and they spoke about gender issues with zero sensitivity. Plus, there was an influx of misinformation doing the rounds. People confused their beliefs and patriarchal upbringing with facts, and really, it was the patriarchal mindset which was to be blamed. The shock and horror that I felt after seeing those posts made me realize that I had been living in a bubble. My privileged education in the field of gender and psychology led me to believe that everyone knows what I know, and everyone discusses these issues with equal nuance and depth. Then, my background as an educator helped me realize that the best way to counter misinformation and lack of sensitivity is through education. Hence, I started Drishtikon Changing Perspectives, which literally translates to Perspectives Changing Perspectives, in August 2018, with the singular aim of educating everybody, regardless of their socio-economic demographics, on the umbrella term that is gender. Over the years, there have been several stories of impact that have touched my heart, as Tenzin very kindly introduced me and mentioned that we have been able to impact more than 50,000 people. So with a special focus on gender education, I have seen significant improvement in a school's overall environment, such as reduced instances of bullying and substance abuse, increased self-esteem and grades among students, and the development of a school environment conducive to everyone's holistic growth. So since November 2020, I've been working with the Ministry of Education of the Tibetan government, which is headquartered in Dharamshala, India, which is a Himalayan region. And I'm working here in the capacity of a fellow with the American India Foundation. And one of my prime roles is to mainstream gender within the Ministry of Education and to aid in developing gender education curriculum for Tibetan schools across India. I'm working towards developing stronger gender and educational policies for the Tibetan government and facilitating gender trainings for the teaching as well as the official government staff. So I'm confident that mandatory gender education is the future. Now, before we begin to teach students on facts, I believe it is crucial to get to know them at a more human level and facilitate an environment conducive to learning not just about the world around them, but also about the people around them. It's about adding that human touch. And towards the same, we would be very well facilitated by the use of internet, judicial use of internet, as I was mentioning. And this is essentially what will propel us in the future. And that is what the educational landscape will essentially look like. With these thoughts, I would leave you guys, and I want you to imagine the scenario where girls like me growing up in India, especially in this Himalayan region, where mainstream media is not that focused, are receiving the kind of education where there is sensitivity, where they are not character assassinated like I was just because their best friends are men or just because they happen to mention the word menstruation. And with these thoughts, I would ask Tenzin to carry forward this beautiful caravan that we're on.
Yes, thank you so much, Shivangi. Next up, we have Sonia Gomez, who will be talking on behalf of education and health in the Himalayan region.
Hello. Namaste to all. Thank you so much to UNICEF USA for this invitation. I would like to take the last words of my colleague that was talking about the word menstruation. And we can really start by here. because my work in Nepal in the social empowerment and health with women started precisely because of that. I mean, I'm European, but I decided to travel to India. And in 2016, when I visit India and I tried to study Tibetan medicine in Mansekan in Dharamsala, I realized and then visit some monasteries and some places, I realized there was a huge difference between the treatment of nuns and monks. And also realized that the conditions of the places, especially where many nuns and women used to stay, were very poor. So after that, I began to question myself why this difference between monks and nuns, why this difference of treatment, of support. And also I realized that was gender and health issues that were very interconnected with the difference that exists there. And then after my journey in India, where I stayed for about 1.5 months in that year, after my journey, I went to Nepal to meet my dear friend, Dr. Kunsang Dolma, that is the president of our NGO, Lotus Heart, and a very dear friend to my heart. So we decided to go also to nunneries in Nepal and start to see the conditions of how people lived, especially nuns. And we realized that there was a lot of health issues, a lot of health problems. And the first started precisely with the menstruation aspect. We realized that many nuns had a lot of difficulty in talking about menstruation, but even worse, we realized that they didn't know what menstruation was for. So I was extremely shocked when I realized that, and I thought that I was a very privileged person because I had study and I had information and I could develop my confidence, everything. And I realized that education was lacking over there, and the self-confidence and total lack of understanding of health questions, because I'm not even there to talk about sexuality question and knowing our own body as female, but health questions. We realized that a lot of women, and especially nuns, they had a lot of gynecology problems due to bad menstruation hygiene, and also lack of a lot of diseases that are related to gynecology. So we decided that it was better to start our work and going to do some medical camps and some information workshops. And we started in Kopan Nunnery, and we did a workshop, a lecture about menstruation precisely. It was very interesting, especially to the young nuns. I realized the young nuns were very interested, were very curious, because they didn't know what menstruation was for. So they were quite curious. They have an idea of menstruation that was a dirty thing, a bad thing, something that was very boring that every month we have. And then they realized that that was a wrong perception, a wrong misunderstanding of what menstruation was. And then we begin also to realize, not only for the health aspect, but for the education aspect, they are interconnected. Because without education, that is not possible to have an healthy society. So we realize one of the problems of the women was precisely they were not educated, they were not informed about their own bodies, about their own female aspects, about some rules, basic hygiene rules related with the feminine body. So we decided to start Lotus Heart project, and Dr. Kunsang Dolma, that is the president of the project, is doing a wonderful work in the field, doing medical camps in remote areas and villages of Nepal, where we have also a big problem, that is the not planning of childbirth. I mean, there is no planning control, and lots of women, especially young girls that marry very early, they get pregnant and they have a lot of children, then they have a lot of complication and problems with gynecology aspects. And we realized that was also due to lack of information about their sexuality, and how is it possible to avoid a group of problems that are connected to their health because they are extremely young. And also we realized that many maybe elder women, they also have a lot of gynecology problems. So because of that, we decide to have this humanist mission of education. And also I realized that in many communities, especially in the rural areas, in the villages, very far away areas from Kathmandu, for example, I realized that people didn't have much access to good hygiene, especially because also no proper water and basic resources. And I also realized there was a lot of children that were not able to go to school, were not able to receive proper education. So also we had the project at Nepal Buddhist Education and Meditation Center, precisely to provide classes for children from and women that are illiterate from remote areas, and especially from some communities, and also some meditation classes to the children. So I think it was very important, and Himalayas are really very big. It's a big extension, and the field of operation there is also a big extension. We could be here talking about many things, many aspects, but for me, the most important one, and the one that made me really go further, and every year travel to Nepal and to India and stay there for a while to work and be near these people and feel their problems and try to share the small knowledge I had with them. So that's what the reason that really moves me to realize that Nepal needs development, Nepal needs attention, and Nepal needs to look at their remote areas and remote village and realize people need clinicals, hospitals, because they have sometimes to travel 10 hours by jeep to reach Kathmandu. And can you imagine when you have a big health problem, have to travel 10 hours by car to reach an hospital? So that really touched my heart. And I really decide to do my best to be present in this cause. But of course, Dr. Kunsan Dolma is the person that is in the field. She's the president of our NGO. And also Lama Karma Sangye is the president, is the chairman of the Share Trust Nepal Buddhist Meditation and Education Center. So together we try to do our best to provide better life quality to these women through health and education. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm willing to receive your questions when appropriate.
Yes, thank you so much, Sania. And then last but not least, we have Tsiring Wangmo, who will be talking about education and development. So the floor is all yours.
Hi, thank you to the previous panelists, and thank you, Kun-sung. So it's raining here, so I hope the voice distractions are not a problem in your end. Okay, so education and development. are two vast and complex subjects that I feel cannot be discussed in a limited context or in a limited time. So I'll try to speak about it by looking at some of the realities, right? In the first point, I have how education impacts the other. So how does modern education impact the people of the Himalayan region who are known and who are studied as the other for a very long time? Education in itself is not a new concept or not a new part of the society here. There has been historically many established centers of education in the places across the Himalaya. Monasteries, for example, are large institutions of education where people learn beyond Buddhist philosophy, subjects such as astronomy, astrology, medicine, and more. Right now, with the introduction of the new systems of education, the previously known education centers are no longer as relevant in the context of education and job, etc. So the new system, although interrupted an already established system, it did bring about a lot of positive changes. It brought access to tools that are as per the changing times that we are living in. It opened new doors of opportunity for the common people, new ways of connecting to the larger world, and expand one's perspective in life. So in the second point, I've changing society and the first generations to go to school. Change is inevitable. Change in all sphere of life in the Himalayan region accelerated after globalization and after infrastructure development, right? And of course, education has such a big role to play as to how do people cope with these changes, or even how to make sense of the education, so to create a more balanced world. In the last 3 decades, I've seen with my own eyes the huge changes that has taken place in Ladakh. Ladakh is a remote region in the northern part of India, in the Himalayas. And in Ladakh, I've seen infrastructures, right, such as highways, air transportation facilities, and the tourism-oriented economy, and how the large number of schools going population has increased. Those things are very clear. And with that, the first generations who go to schools now arises. The majority of the youths who are in school are actually first in their family to do so. And that brings a unique challenges in itself. I am myself a first generation to have accessed the services of and higher education. Um, I was born in Ladakh, right, a very remote region, to two Tibetan refugee parents who came to India in 1960. So large focus on Tibetan language, prayer functions, and a lot of cultural. In that context, coming back to the challenges faced by the first generations, there are actually two kinds of problems that usually the first generations face. One that can be very basic, like being unable to understand the way school works, or being unable to select the right courses in college, right, due to not having a family member to ask, or due to a lack of mentorship, right? The challenges can sometimes be complex too, like a first generation getting into the education system, which demands so much of their years, so much of commitment, and at the end being unable to get jobs. So, and at the same time, the first generation who have committed a lot of years to that education, becoming completely separated from jobs or works that their parents and ancestors might have done, skill-based jobs or self-sustainable ways of life, such as farming or nomadic pastoralism. And in Ladakh today, just like in many parts of the Himalayan region, unemployment is on the rise. Institutions and families are now beginning to look for a more meaningful ways to access tools of education. In many schools across the Himalaya, career counselors, right? A basic concept to have a career counselors in every school and mentorship. Those things are getting started and being taken very seriously. And there is an increased focus on holistic education in the Himalayan region. Coming to the third point of reclaiming our story and identity, since development can be both tangible and intangible, one of the ways education has impacted the Himalayan region is in the context of representation. We are now able to break stereotypes, become the voice of our stories, reclaim our identity, and participate better in governmental decisions. At the end, I would now like to conclude by saying that education is a basic human right. After all, it empowers the society and brings equality, especially for marginalized groups. And education is much more meaningful when it also increases respect for and appreciation of traditional ways of life. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you guys for these really informative talks. The audience members and I learned a lot. It's super cool to see this type of work centralized in under-resourced communities such as Himalayan countries. So we will start off with questions from the audience. There are, I think, 5 questions. So first off, we'll start off with Shivangi. So someone asked, has the spread of misinformation on social media and the internet worsened discussions about assessing sexism? And if so, how does Drishtikona combat this?
Hi, first of all, let me just start by saying that it was amazing to listen to my co-panelists. They were super insightful. And just as Serena mentioned, it's raining, so I hope the sound doesn't disturb you. Now, coming to the question. So absolutely, the spread of misinformation on social media was super disturbing to me even before I started Drishtikon. And in fact, to a large extent, it inspired the idea behind Drishtikon that absolutely everyone needs to be sensitized on gender issues. So this is actually one of the prime things that we focus and in our workshop. So what we do, how we disseminate these information is through workshops. So we educate people, sensitize people on gender issues in a workshop format that we cater, and we basically customize it to different audience groups. So depending on whether it is being delivered to a school, a college, an office, it is altered accordingly. So what happens is social media is a very, very important part that we discuss, especially in the schools, especially in educational institutes. So we discuss about what are the ways in which one can verify the information that is being put out. Because as I mentioned when I was talking, people often confuse their own beliefs and their patriarchal upbringing with facts. So we do this activity where we present a series of statements and we ask them whether it is a belief or whether it is a fact. So in this way, Drishtikon combats misinformation on social media. And I believe that there are a lot of social institutions that are doing that. And it is such an important part of education today. Schools, teachers, I think, you don't need any labels, you don't need any extra help in doing this. Just present this idea to students of all ages that there is this distinction, a very important distinction between facts and between what your belief is, your opinion is. And while it is important to be confident in expressing your opinion and your belief, make sure that you remember what is fact and what's just something that you very strongly believe in due to whatever reason. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes. The next question is for Sonia. So you talked about this a little bit in the Q&A chat, but Someone asked, now that mental health is being more and more recognized around the world, how have communities in Nepal responded to this?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I was really answering, writing there, but I think it's better to say directly. Lotus Heart, the NGO we have in Nepal, started a program for suicide prevention, especially in remote areas. If you visit our website, you have there some elements about the suicide prevention. And also we are going to start now a new program in the field directly to work with the people that try suicide and have to deal directly with the suicidal question. At this moment, this is really an important issue in Nepal. I think not only in Nepal, but mainly we are realizing that maybe because of the crisis, COVID, so many things. I think it's one of the most important points is the mental health at the moment, and precisely Lotus Heart started a program for suicide prevention.
Okay, and then the next question is for Ting. So it's someone asked, what was it like being a first generation college student moving from Ladakh to an urban area?
Thank you for the question. Okay, it was really challenging, but I actually studied 2 years here in Dharamshala. And then for my college education, I moved to South India, to Chennai, right? So looking back, one of the biggest problems that I faced was an identity crisis. Everyone else belonging to the place and me coming from a completely different place. And that actually, you know, as a teenager, that actually forced me to think about my own identity as a Tibetan, as a woman. And it really pushed me to grow up and then find ways to express myself. And I think that is one of the most profound ways that shifting from a rural area to an urban area in India has impacted me personally.
Yeah, the idea of identity crisis is very universal. I feel like I also kind of struggle with that as well. So thank you for sharing. So next up is for a question for both Shivangi and Sonia. So someone asked, how do you think we can further destigmatize menstruation under the patriarchy and within our own households and communities?
Yes. 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 Thank you very much for this question. I think one of the ways of creating space for this situation is precisely to talk about it openly. To talk about it openly and precisely to mention clearly that menstruation is a very healthy thing. I guess the problem is the lack of information about the importance of menstruation. So I think the best way to not have stigma against menstruation and to open up to the world, including men and women, because we also have patriarchy in women. Okay, so this was one thing I would like to bring up. So in this patriarchic aspect, or in the aspect of male dissonance from this area, I think bringing the issue openly and explaining the benefits for the body of the menstruation and the importance of the menstruation for a woman, that is the best way to create a new space to discuss openly and embrace menstruation as something very beautiful in a woman's life.
Thank you so much for that, Sonia. That's, I think, wonderful what you've said. And just to add on to that, I believe that what we can do is also just see right now what is happening is that many times we feel that it's not enough because while there are a lot of initiatives focused on this, especially in rural parts of India, or if I'm specifically talking about Himalayan regions, then we see that there are a lot of NGOs which are discussing issues like disposal of menstrual waste, which is a very interesting topic because in Himalayas, we are facing this issue of waste disposal at large and specifically menstrual waste disposal. So what they're doing is that they're targeting these specific areas, even within, menstruation, the whole umbrella term of menstruation, there are so many things. You destigmatize it, and then there are all these issues. So what we are doing now is to, especially if I talk about it from the perspective of Tibetan government and the initiatives and policies that are coming in. So there are these mandatory classes and the focus on educating people about menstruation and just, something as simple as using this word openly. When I remember that when I was in school or even in college, it used to be a big taboo. So these are the small things that make a lot of difference. When women feel this freedom that they can sit and they can just talk about it, or they can say that, okay, I'm having really bad cramps, or I'm experiencing something because of my menstrual cycle. And they know that it is in an environment which is safe, and they can actually address these concerns to people, and they will not be disrespected or looked down upon for that, because that used to happen in the past. So now the focus is on educating, and that is exactly what I want to highlight. With education and sensitization, all these things, they slowly start to lose their hold. So in household with a lot of men, what happens is when we have students who are boys and they come from families where they are the only children, or where they only have brothers, they don't know about these things, and they never had to learn about it. But what happens is when they are in a classroom and everybody is talking about it regardless of their gender, and we're educating not only women but absolutely everybody about menstruation, that is when you see the conversation shifting. And they understand, as Sonia was saying, the importance. What is menstruation? Why is it important? When you connect it to the whole cycle of it as being important to the very existence of human life, that is when you see that shift in the way people look at it. So again, like in one word, if I have to say what's the best way to destigmatize it, I would say education, awareness, sensitization, talk. The more you talk openly about it, the more you see that all that stigma and all the myths around it, they bust, and that starts to move away.
Yeah, you mentioned education a lot, so I think it's, oh yeah.
So
Yes, precisely. Agree 100%, Shivangi.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
do you want to?
Yes. So just wanted to add something very basic, something very personal, right? So during our younger years, do you remember going out to buy pads? We have to put it in a newspaper so that no one will see it. Now, even in in an experience like that, I see small changes. And now women nowadays shy less when they go out to shops and buy sanitary napkins. And that's also a personal experience that I've had when I was a teenager, up until now, right? So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, very much so in the United States as well. And I also wanted to echo on Shivangi's point about education. You mentioned it a lot. I think it's fitting with the theme of this webinar, which is Education X and how intersectional it is. So I thought that was very fitting. Someone asked, hello, thank you so much. I have a question for Tsiringla. Could you talk more about mother tongue education across this region and how programs think about language of instruction?
Okay. Thank you so much for the question. And this question, I think, requires answers from a lot of different groups, from people who are decision makers of the schools in the region, and people who are at the receiving end, parents and students who are in this school, right? So now I can speak in the context of Tibetan schools that are in India. I went and attended TCV school, which are schools specifically built for Tibetan refugees. And also I went to Dharamshala for higher education, and that too was a Tibetan school. So in the context of Tibetan schools, where thousands of students graduate, there had been a lot of discussion about what the language should be. Nowadays, the Central Tibetan Administration and also the independent educational groups in the exile community focuses a lot on creating the whole of curriculum to Tibetan language. So when I was in school, from kindergarten to till 5th standard, everything was in Tibetan, right? And then at the 6th grade, we shifted to English language. So that's when we actually started learning all the subjects in English. Now, if I express my own personal opinion, because it will not be right to speak on behalf of someone else. So I feel that focusing on mother tongue, specifically focusing on the whole of the curriculum through Tibetan language, I think it poses a lot of challenges for the children when they go on to colleges and universities, and when they go out to look for jobs. But incorporating Tibetan language within the subjects in the school, I think is really important, because when one's language vanishes, I think that's a great loss to the nation. And in the case of Tibetans, language is one of our most important identity. So yeah, that's the short answer that I can give with my own personal opinions.
Yes, thank you for that response. The next question is for all of you guys. What are some individual challenges that you've had to face as women in your work? So anyone can take the floor.
Okay, so I would like to begin. I think, I can do a whole session of 1 hour at least just discussing this. But the short answer is that even within, these so-called intellectual workspaces in India, I face this issue where for the same qualities, a girl, or in my case, if I'm making it specifically about me, I was neglected, and I noticed that men are being highlighted for that. For example, when I joined the workforce, I was very introverted. I was not the kind of person who would just immediately enter the social scene, and I noticed that I was called rude for that just because I happened to be a girl, whereas a man displaying that same quality and missing out the same functions as me, or talking the way I do within limited spaces, was considered serious or more professional. So just for this one personality trait of introversion, I had to face a lot just because gender got involved in the mix. Then I have faced an incident where there was this was before the Me Too movement hit India, and I was new to the workspace, and I was working in an NGO. Now there was an incident of a male program manager sexually advancing towards giving unwanted sexual advances in a very, very direct and graphic manner to an employee. And basically there was a case, and at the end of it, the woman who was my friend was blamed for it. And basically she was victim blamed and in no uncertain terms. So, these are the kind of incidents which happened, and they basically jolted me quite a lot, because I was wondering, as somebody who was working in NGOs, as a journalist, I thought that these are the kind of spaces which are liberated. So the reason why, being an engineer, I didn't enter the engineering spaces or corporate workspace was because I somewhere wanted to work in a more sensitive environment, and I expected these places to be more sensitive, but I was in for the shock of my life. Because what happens is that in leadership positions, you will still find those patriarchal people with patriarchal mindsets. So they are still calling the shots. If they are not patriarchal, then their sponsors or people who are funding them have that mentality. So what happens is, at the end of the day, if you're a girl, they expect you to behave like a girl, in the sense that you have to fit into that stereotype. Many times I've seen that people are treating women a certain way because of their physical appearance. So they are just really saying that, okay, I want to work with this person because I find them attractive. I've heard that quite a lot. And I'm not going to take this person in my team because I don't find them attractive. And this only happens with women. So these are the kind of incidents, small incidents that happen. And it is so normalized that you don't even realize the extent of it unless you are a woman and you are very sensitive to that. So yeah, this is like a very short answer. Like I mentioned, there are so many incidents that I faced that it would take up a whole evening.
Well, I think I'm very blessed. I didn't have to face so many challenges, because the most important one was because I'm Western, because I am not in the culture. So everybody like put me a bit aside because I'm Inji. So your Inji is like you stay away, not for a bad reason, okay? But it's just that I'm not Tibetan, I'm not Himalayan. So what are you doing here? What, you are not from our cult, from our group. This was my biggest challenge. But I was very fortunate because, as I mentioned before, my dear friend, Dr. Kunzang Dolma, and also Lamala, they were very close to the communities, to the Tibetan community. So it was quite easy to be accepted, even being Western. And it was quite interesting because, yes, I realized I had a problem with a few men, especially when I went to some conference. Yes, as I have, because as a few men still see women as like interesting dolls. They are not seeing women as something with brain that really thinks, and they are finding grace and funny. So yeah, I have to face that challenge too. And even in the end of one of the conference, precisely in India, I had a person that tried to come and pick me, like, to not be very, so it was quite challenging, feeling like many women in India maybe feel when they are trying to be raped. So it was quite a very intense experience. I was totally not expecting. The lucky was that I had people around from the conference that immediately came and stopped the situation, but it was very embarrassing. But what I realized sometimes is that it's also a challenge for women to try to sit and educate men in this area. You know, like a mother sits her son and say, look, you are going to listen to me. You are going to understand this and this and this. I think it's important to women and not to sometimes be like imposing things, but say, no, let's sit and talk and present facts. Because I think I didn't have many problems, for example, with the menstruation issue and even with some sexuality issues, because I presented facts and it's evidences. And then with evidences, people cannot, you know, say much. Is there, they see, they live, so they say, oh, okay. And I realized that also in the Himalayan communities, women are very shy. They totally repress their sexuality. They don't talk about that. It's like if that was a shame. And when they have an Inji that talks openly about some things, in the end, they call you and say, look, come. Can I ask a question? Is this, is that? I will not mention the questions because they are very personal, but it's funny to realize that they have exactly the same questions as a Western woman has. It's just that they are so shy, it's cultural. They don't feel comfortable to ask openly. And sometimes they even feel they are not normal because they have this kind of feelings and thoughts because it's not allowed to a woman. So I think it's very important also to say to women, they should not be afraid and educate them to don't be scared to give their thoughts and ask their questions. This is very important. And also not repress. It's wonderful to be a woman. It's wonderful to have a female body. It's wonderful. So we don't need to be worried about that. We should just embrace it, educate women for that. And when you educate women, you educate a society. Men will be educated also, but sometimes women also educate men not very good. So my challenge, my biggest challenge was realizing that many women serve men. How can I educate women if they are still serving men and still be subservient? Is very difficult. So it's a question also of mentality. You need to educate. When you educate the woman, you will educate the man. That's interconnected. So, but my biggest challenge was like to be a Western, yeah, in the communities. Thank you.
So, hi. So the question exactly was, what are some individual challenges? So I grew up in a family that did not differentiate between their their sons and daughters, right? My parents were nomads who later in their life settled in the town. And I actually, in my home setting, I grew up empowered as a women member of my family and of the community at large. So I started sensing some threats, you know, just because I am a woman when I travel in India. So many years ago, when I had to report as an intern for a newspaper in India. So I had to spend late hours into the night and go back to my place. At such times, it is really challenging as a woman uh, to commit to my work just because now it's getting dark. You know, so these are challenges which seems to be taken for granted. Actually has a lot of impact on how a woman chooses the kind of jobs that they choose and how women actually let go of many opportunities in their life. And women, we ourselves, we are sometimes, you know, so used to eve teasing in India that sometimes when I'm with my friends, when someone's eve teasing us, we would just you know, make fun of it. We would never take it seriously. It's just taken really lightly just because it exists every day especially in a place like Delhi Metro, men rubbing against your elbow, all these things, which, which actually, when I think about it, it's really gross, right? But we get so used to it at certain point. So, so those things, and I would say in my work as a woman who work in the field of films, I always feel a lack of space, or a lack of a community where I can go discuss, share my ideas, or uh, a lack of a team with whom I can, start creating projects, other women with whom I can be creative. So I always feel that there is a lack of a group of women filmmakers with whom I can collaborate. So that's one of the biggest challenge in my work, having no space for myself. And
Yes, thank you all for sharing your experiences. Since we are going a little above time, the last question is, what can we do as individuals to help support your work and further your cause? And it can just be like a few quick sentences, but yes, thank you for the audience members for staying a little past 11 too. Does anyone want to take the question? So what can we individuals do to help support your work and further your cause?
So I think something as simple as, like I was saying, the importance of communicating, talking openly about it. So something very basic, like having an open conversation with the women in your life, for example. When it comes to gender, for example, just now we answered a question where we opened up and told you about the challenges that we all faced in our workplaces. So these are the kind of things that we all have faced. As Serindra said, that it's become so common, it's become so normal that we try to lighten the situation by humor, by making fun of it. When actually it is not okay. What is happening is not okay. So, you know, as people, as community members, try to have those genuine conversations with the women in your life, or with people who don't, don't conform to the gender binary, for example. Try talking to somebody who has different views than you, or who is just somebody who's brought up differently, so that you understand in what ways can our perspectives shift and what change really needs to happen. So just open communication, genuine communication, when you're actually connecting with somebody and getting to know about their issues. So this is like a very simple way in which we all can contribute to the cause. We all can become more aware, because that's the aim, right? With education, and if I'm talking about gender, the aim is to sensitize everybody. The aim is that gender education should not be restricted to certain intellectual circles, certain academic circles. It should reach out to absolutely everybody. Any effort happening on menstruation, or towards curbing homophobia, and creating awareness about trans people, this has to be taken to the very grassroots level, and then to absolutely everybody. So the one basic method is to just communicate, talk to people who you wouldn't normally talk to in your social group, or within your family. Try to see what they actually go through, understand their lived realities, and don't try to bring your own biases or judgments to it, because you have to understand that somebody's lived reality. For example, if a woman is talking about an incident of sexual harassment or eve teasing, please don't at least give them that space to talk. Don't just jump in with your solutions, or with your preconceived notions or biases. Let them just communicate, open, share their heart out. And then you have to be that listener, be a good listener, basically. So something as simple as communication can really open many doors. And from there onwards, you can take it forward and you can begin to change yourself. So I strongly believe that change begins with one person at a time. Change begins with you, and that is your responsibility. So absolutely, it's good that you are taking initiative. It's good that you are thinking of what to do at a broader scale. But before that, rein in and think about how you can transform yourself, your family, your closest circle of friends.
Yes, I think Shivangi, she mentioned all. Just one point, I think if people really want to support our work and engage in these causes, one of the main points is to, for example, visit our webpage and be more engaged in what we are doing, supporting financially, even trying to sponsor some of our causes, especially I'm talking for Lotus Heart in our medical camps in the remote villages of Nepal, because it's very important, and for suicidal prevention. So one of the best ways is to try to be informed of what we really do, because sometimes we don't put things in social media. We are very busy working. So it is important to be aware that we do things and we need support. And if you are aware of what we do, you also can participate and be present with us. Thank you.
Thank you. So what can we do, right? So in terms of education and development, I feel helping younger generations access education in intelligent manner is really important. And here I would like to focus on mentorship, which I realize a lot of people in the West have good access to, right? That's something that's granted to them from their school years. But mentorship is something that's a crucial part of a child's development in the education, when they go through the education system. And mentorship is a service that's lacking when we talk about the Himalayan region, something that I have personally felt throughout the years. So I think one of the ways, it's a very, very simple way that we can help the younger generation is to mentor whenever we can and help them navigate through programs that they might not know about, that might be helpful to them in achieving their pursuits. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for all your responses. So thank you for the panelists for bearing with my countless emails and sharing your experiences and knowledge with the rest of the world, since there are people internationally based. Thank you to Leslie, my community engagement associate, and also Neil for helping me get started on this project. I also want to thank the audience members for attending this webinar and caring about such a topic. And I hope you've learned more about this area that is more than just a tourist attraction. Although it's known for its beautiful mountains, these countries have people with stories to tell, and there is still more work to be done. So hosting this webinar was one way in which I was giving back to this community. So thank you, everyone. And whenever you're ready, you can just leave this Zoom meeting, and panelists, if you could just stay an extra minute or so, that would be great.